Hey everyone, MeltyMan234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Crash Bandicoot, a series that I remembered playing a lot when I was a kid. A series that was a classic in the 90s. A series that Activision... Wait a minute, didn't I already do this episode? Let's see... Oh, no, the version I did before was an April Fool's prank. Yeah, that was a bad timing back then. Well, most of you knew that this was going to happen anyway, so let's just jump right into canceled Crash Bandicoot games 2. This time for real. Before I begin the list, there's at least one game that I would like to briefly revisit because there's a lot more info on it. Remember that canceled Crash game that featured Crash, Dingodile, and those Bandicoot critters? Yeah, that game was called Crash Landed. Radical Entertainment and Activision were working on it, and it was also planned to be for the DS instead of just for consoles. It was indeed intended to be a reboot that would retell the story of Crash Bandicoot and Dr. Cortex. And that's about it. I already covered most of it in the first part, so now let's get on to the new ones. First up is Crush Bandicoot, an idea that was pitched by Magenta Software back in 2004. The game would involve Crash's evil twin brother, Crush. Cortex would also be involved in the game, and that's about it. There's only a small handful of concept art and beta footage of the game, like how it was going to have open worlds to explore and some vehicles to drive around in. Sounds interesting, though. Next up is a Crash Bandicoot game that was pitched by Chrome Studios, the same company who has worked on the Ty the Tasmanian Tiger games. After Twinsanity, they began working on a new Crash game and was scheduled to be released for the DS. It didn't get very far in development, and they decided to focus on their attention in rebooting the Spyro the Dragon series, which became the Legend of Spyro trilogy. There is some concept art for the project, but due to legal reasons it can't be shown, so who knows what this game could have been like. Maybe it had something to do with Crash Twinsanity 2! Yeah, there was going to be a sequel to that game, and the only thing that was known about the game would involve Cortex creating a device that would suck Crash into the world of television. He would go to a western level, a black and white cartoon, a hospital drama, and there was even an idea where he lands on a cooking show hosted by Rusty Walrus from Twinsanity. As for who was working on the game and what consoles it was going to be released for, well, nobody knows. Next up is Bandicoot Brats. What is this game? I don't know. I found it on the currently under construction Crash Mania website on the unreleased games category. I can't find any info on this game, so I have no idea what it is. Some kind of game that features a younger Crash Bandicoot? Some game based off of those Brat girls from Titans and Mutants? Some kind of cross-promotional tie-in with Bratz dolls? No idea. If this turns out to be something completely made up with no concrete evidence to support it, then I apologize in advance. Next up is an unreleased Crash Bandicoot game made by Vicarious Visions, the company known for making Crash Bandicoot games on the Game Boy Advance. There's practically no info on this game. A poster to this game was leaked on the web back in 2012. People thought it was going to be a new game in the works, but Activision clarified that it was just a poster to an old cancelled project. Next is a Crash Bandicoot game that was in production in April of 2012 and then cancelled on May of 2013. As you might have expected, not much is known about this game. Sheesh, this is more worse than the cancelled Pac-Man games episode. The game never made it past pre-beta, and Activision never gave a reason why it was cancelled. All that remains is a small handful of models and concept art featuring Crash, Cortex, and Pinstripe. Another remake/reboot perhaps? It would make some sense, since one of the pieces of art looks like a revamped version of the generator room level from the first game. Who knows? Still looks cool though. Next is Crash Bandicoot for the PS4. Yeah, apparently there was some talk about a Crash game on the PS4, aside from that PS4 trailer that featured a silhouette of Crash. And here's a big surprise, nothing is known about this game, except that it was being developed by Kearney Games. Sony Computer Entertainment didn't want to publish it, seeing as how Activision still owns the Crash franchise, and so the game was scrapped and had to be reworked into Knack. And I can kind of see that the character Knack has a very uncanny similarity to Crash's design. And finally, we have Crash Team Racing. No, not the original. This game was in the works back in 2010. Yeah, might as well end this episode with another revisit since there's actually more info on this game this time. It's another racing game that would feature cutscenes, customizable vehicles, mods, tons of tracks, and so on and so on. The game would be a follow-up to Crash Landed, hence why they both share the same style. The characters that were shown to be playable were, obviously, Crash Bandicoot, Dingodile, Polar, and a very demented-looking shark called Land Shark. The game was developed by High Impact Games that was made up of former members of Naughty Dog and Insomniac Games, and it was being published by Activision. It looks like it could have been a really fun game, but it ended up being cancelled. Sheesh, some of these games sounded cool, but I blame Activision for canceling them all. You know why? Well, almost every cancelled Crash game had Activision involved in some way. And who was the one that canceled them all? Activision themselves. I'm very convinced that company put a curse on the franchise. Yeah, if it's not Call of Duty or Skylanders, then clearly Activision doesn't give jack shit about Crash Bandicoot and its huge fan base. And all these recent fake teases and misunderstood comments are not helping either. There, now I've covered all of the cancelled Crash Bandicoot games. And it's a fitting time too, seeing as how 2016 will mark the franchise's 20th anniversary. Now, I'd like to see Crash Bandicoot return as much as the next guy, but the only time that'll happen is if somebody breaks the Activision curse. And who knows if that'll ever happen. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out. Is if somebody breaks the Activision curse. And who knows when that'll ever happen.